Just before we get into the video, have you ever wondered how hard it is to be an observer in Valorant? Well, wonder no more, because I'm hosting a tournament on my Twitch channel, and for the first day, I'm going to be doing all of the observing. Now, this tournament is for people in my Discord. Go and join the Discord if you haven't already, but I'd really appreciate if you could come and join and watch, along as we have fun and merriment and watch people play Valorant and try and win money. Are we heading for a no flash meta? I know that the idea sounds absolutely crazy, but hear me out on this one. Let's just take a look at the different classes and where they're at right now. Let's start with the duelists, and obviously the duelist class is dominated by Jett and Raze, neither of which have flashes, and pretty much across every map, one of Jett or Raze, or maybe even both, are going to see play. If we take a look at the controllers, double controller is still going to be extremely strong. Viper, in my opinion, is the strongest agent in the game, and she didn't get any nerfs, and so still should be one of, if not the strongest agents in the game, so double controller still seems like it should be a pretty good option. And the Sentinel class as well. Sure, Killjoy has been receiving some nerfs, but I still think on certain maps is still very strong. And of course, with the Cypher buffs, we've seen a real Cypher resurgence, where it seems like he's actually a very good agent right now and is in a very good position to see quite a bit of play. And so your duelist won't have a flash, you'll probably want to be playing a Sentinel, and also double controller is still going to be really strong. If you do go down that route, then you've only got one space in the team comp left, and if you do go down into that space, it would have been Skye that would have been filling that role for you with both flashes and a hard drone. But that's the thing, I do think that it's pretty possible that teams might value that hard drone side of the initiator rather than a flash. And I should just quickly mention that, of course, this won't apply to all of the maps, and yes, Omen does have a flash, but I'm not really including Omen's flash necessarily because it is quite different to the way the most initiators' flashes work, for instance. But don't just take it from me that flashes might be on the way out. Let's listen to this clip of Anders talking with my boy Elevated on his podcast.
I'll be honest, I don't think flashes are a good piece of utility. In the majority of maps, I think that flashes are just flatly less efficient at doing their job than most alternatives.
Interesting.
And the reason for that is there's this concept that I've been trying to preach like more and more, which is angle denial persistence. If I can jiggle your flash, how much good is it doing?
Right.
Whereas if I throw a fade eye or I throw a recon that says you have to interact with this in order to be able to get back onto your line in a meaningful way, otherwise I have persistent denial of your angle, that's huge.
And that's interesting coming from Anders, because Anders was working with Fnatic last year, and of course Fnatic last year, perhaps their best map last year was Lotus, where they didn't play any flashes. And at first, when they first brought out that kind of comp, you know, a lot of people were pretty skeptical of Fnatic and what were they doing playing a no flash comp, but obviously, as we saw, it worked pretty well for them because they won most of their games on Lotus and most of them pretty convincingly as well. And so we have a proof that this can work on at least one map, and so then the question becomes, why can't that necessarily work on other maps as well? And that won't be the only instance in this map pool either, because Icebox is a map that before it left, it was kind of a no flash meta map, and now I would suspect that it's going to be a no flash meta map again. And so now we've got maybe multiple maps where you can see that no flashes could actually work, which then begs the question, okay, if it can work on two maps, how many more can it actually be meta on? And yesterday there was a game on Bind with one of the teams that hasn't lost yet called Sad Esports. They aren't playing any flashes on Bind now either and are going with Sova instead of a Skye. And again, I brought up that yesterday Skye, I think when you look at it and you really dig down into how that's going to work, it's not that she's unplayable and that you can't play her in any of these comps, but it's a definite big downgrade to only have two flashes for the entire round, and maybe we could see more teams going in this direction where they do play something like a Sova, and again, play no flash on a map like Bind. And really this does all relate back to that Skye nerf, because before with Skye, if you were playing double controller, she would fill all of those gaps for you, but now obviously Skye, you know, there's a big risk with picking her essentially because, you know, you've only got so much of that initiator utility, and that's a pretty big, massive downside. Now, the question that you have to ask yourself if you are a team is, okay, who's a better agent? Skye or a Sova, or, you know, particularly on certain maps, maybe it's Fade instead, right? Like, what would you rather go for? And I think most people would probably say that Sky is going to be worse than Fade or Sova, depending on the maps. And in my opinion, Viper is still the strongest agent in the game, and Double Controller is still going to be very strong. So this is how we get to a no flash meta. But then in a very weird way, if no one is running flashes, it kind of makes Double Controller potentially even better, particularly Harbor Viper, because if you can't flash through a wall, if you can't pop flash through it, your opponents are very unlikely to ever really just, dry swing through your walls if they're taking a slow or if they're taking a decay when they do it. That just doesn't seem like a very good idea without a pop flash coming through it, right? So it kind of has made Double Controller better if we do go in this way, and kind of fortified Double Controller even more so if, we do end up in a place where a lot of teams aren't running flashes on quite a various few maps. That would be and in a weird kind of way, this would make Double Controller potentially even better if no one was running any flashes. Because of course, if you aren't running any flashes, then there isn't a great way for your opponents to get through that wall, right? Like, how are they going to ever surprise you, right? Right now, you could just pop flash through and go through pretty much at any time. But if they don't run any flashes, are they really going to take a decay or take a slow, just running through the wall normally? That probably isn't the greatest idea in the world. And so it might have a very bizarre effect on the meta where Double Controller would become even more valuable. But some of you will be able to scratch beneath the surface and get what I'm really hinting at here. And that is, it's time for a Yoru meta. This is the time for the Yoru meta, my friends. It absolutely is. Yoru goes well with Double Controller because when you TP in, you've got more smokes to cover you, and you can also pop flash through all of the walls. That's pretty good as well. Cypher is very meta right now. Yoru is pretty good against Cypher because you can TP past trips. The fake clone will run into trips for you, alerting you where those trips are very well, and potentially people will then shoot those trips thinking that it's a person trapped in them, but instead it's a Yoru clone and they'll get blinded instead, which is also good for you. Yoru also synergizes pretty well with Sova because as you TP in deep, Sova has the range to potentially send a dart for you to allow you to know where people are as you're TPing in as the Yoru. So if we are heading towards those kind of agents, this is literally the best time for Yoru to potentially ever exist. Now, will we go to a Yoru meta? No. Probably not. Because people will need to put in work to make Yoru good, and they're probably just going to stick with Jet and Raze because that's what they already know how to play. But honestly, in my opinion, I do think that Yoru plus Sova plus Double Controller and a Sentinel on quite a few of the different maps might be a half-decent direction for someone to go in. Problem is, though, we're going to need one of Fnatic or whoever the top Americas team is going to be. One of those probably need to actually be the ones playing it because those are the teams that the other teams tend to follow. So more likely than not, we will just see teams maybe move away from Double Controller a bit more and into more of a double initiator meta like we've had many, many times before.